Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where the wind never really stops. The ceilings are too low for modern hairdos, and your roommates are likely to be sheep. You're in 14th century Iceland now, inside a turf house, crouching to enter, blinking through the smoke, and wondering if your toes will ever feel warmth again. The turf house is alive with a certain dampness, part soil, part sweat, and part, please don't touch anything. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dim interior. There's no electricity, of course, just a dim oil lamp dangling from a soot-blackened beam, flickering like it's reconsidering its life choices. The walls are thick with layers of earth and stone, held together by sod and moss. There's a smell. It's not terrible, just ancient. A blend of wet wool, damp straw, and possibly a ghost. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck beneath the timbered lintel as you enter the turf house. Not that you have much of a choice. Most medieval Icelanders were shorter than modern folks, and if you're over 5'8", prepare for daily forehead bruises. The floor is packed earth. It gives slightly under your boots. There's a narrow hallway, if you can call it that, flanked by low partitions made of driftwood, stone, and more sod. It's like someone built a maze using only mud and vibes. A woman brushes past you, carrying a bundle of dried fish. You try to say hello, but she's already yelling something in Old Norse about someone not feeding the cow. It's fine. You're not here to socialize. You're here to experience how these people lived, one peat-scented moment at a time. The main room, or badstofa, is the heart of the home. You step inside and are immediately greeted by a wave of warmth and smoke. A central hearth burns lazily, its fire more smolder than flame, filling the house with enough smoke to give everyone that signature Icelandic eyeliner look. There's a small hole in the roof to let the smoke out, but it mostly lets the cold in instead. Historians still argue whether this system was intentionally designed or just the result of everyone giving up halfway through. You look around. Low wooden platforms line the sides of the room. Beds, really, though they're more like communal sleeping shelves. Everyone in the household, from granny to farmhand, piles in together under heaps of sheepskins. Personal space wasn't a thing. In fact, if you had enough room to turn over without accidentally elbowing someone in the face, you were either very rich or very alone. One historical fact that often surprises people: turf houses were surprisingly well insulated. That thick sod exterior acted like a natural thermos, trapping heat in the winter and coolness in the summer. It wasn't luxury, but it worked. You'd still wake up with frost on your blanket some mornings, but that was just part of the charm, or the frostbite. You run your hand along the wall. The moss is soft, cool. It's grown intentionally. This isn't just some overgrown shack. Building a turf house was serious business, often involving the entire community. You had to stack stone foundations, lay down birchwood timbers, then layer turf bricks cut from the hillside. The result? A home that looked like a hobbit had a nervous breakdown. There's a tiny room off to the side. A pantry, maybe. It smells like dried fish and pickled sorrow. Hanging from the rafters are bundles of herbs, slabs of mutton, and what looks suspiciously like a goat leg. Everything is preserved with salt, smoke, and hope. A cat darts past your feet, or possibly a large rat. Either way, you let it go. It lives here now. Quirky tidbit. Some turf houses had built-in stables for animals, inside the house. That's right. You, Grandma, and a handful of very judgmental sheep all bunking under the same roof. The idea was to trap heat, but the side effect was an atmosphere best described as barnyard deluxe. Modern open-concept homes could never. You sit on the edge of a wooden platform, trying not to inhale too deeply. The air's a little heavy, and it's not just the smoke. It's the centuries. These houses were passed down for generations. People were born here, died here, carved their names into the wooden beams when they were bored or in love, or both. Some beams still have those runic messages scratched in, hidden beneath centuries of soot, like little time capsules of teen angst and cow-themed poetry. Outside, the wind rattles the turf roof. The sound is oddly soothing, like nature whispering threats. You can understand why people rarely left once winter set in. Travel was brutal. Roads were basically just slippery regrets, and the only real reason to visit the next village was to marry your cousin or borrow a goose. And you? You're tucked into a moss-covered cocoon, hearing the murmur of voices, the crackling of the fire, and the ever-present sigh of the wind pressing against the turf walls. The house isn't just shelter. It's part of the landscape, a hibernating beast curled up under the frost. You lie back for a moment. The sheepskin itches, the smoke stings your eyes, and someone's foot is definitely way too close to your face. But despite all that, or maybe because of it, there's a strange peace here, a timeless rhythm, a quiet resignation to life lived in cycles of dark and light, cold and colder. Welcome to the turf house. You live here now. You wake, or at least open your eyes, to a barely there light filtering through a small frost-fringed window. The house is cold. Not brr chilly cold. Not I should put socks on cold. No, this is the kind of cold that nestles deep into your bones and tells your ancestors to start shivering on your behalf. The air smells faintly of ash, wool, and wet earth. Somewhere in the dark, someone coughs. A baby whimpers. A sheep bleats. You're still half asleep, unsure whether you're dreaming or genuinely living in a glorified grassy lump. But the wind, ah yes, the wind, makes it abundantly clear. It's back, and louder than ever, screaming across the Icelandic plains like it's auditioning for an exorcism. Outside, the landscape is bleak in the most poetic way possible. There are no trees. Well, maybe one, somewhere, bent sideways by a century of gales. The ground is dark, volcanic, and rugged, dotted with low shrubs and moss like nature gave up halfway through decorating. Mountains loom in the distance, but they're less majestic postcard and more sullen stone giants who haven't had coffee. You step outside the turf house and immediately question that decision. The wind hits you like a slap from a cold, angry ghost. Your cloak flaps wildly behind you, trying to abandon this timeline. Your nose regrets existing. Your eyes begin to water. It's not even snowing, really. Just tiny, aggressive shards of ice masquerading as air. Here in 14th century Iceland, the weather isn't something you check. It's something you endure. Farmers didn't rise early to greet the sun with yoga poses. They squinted into the void, muttered a prayer or curse, and then hoped their sheep hadn't been carried off by the wind during the night. Mainstream historical fact: the harsh Icelandic climate heavily influenced how communities were structured. Homes like turf houses were built low to the ground, often sunken, to resist the punishing winds and trap heat. Settlements huddled near geothermal springs or along fjords for a shred of natural warmth and access to fish. And those rare occasions when the sun did shine for more than 5 minutes, people would drag everything outside, blankets, clothes, even kids, just to dry the damp off their lives. The construction of turf houses wasn't just architectural genius, it was pure survival. Unlike the timber-rich regions of Europe, Iceland lacked forests. So settlers had to get creative. They used driftwood carried from distant shores, bones from whales, and volcanic stone from the land itself. The rest? Sod. Lovely, mold-prone, wind-cheating sod. You run your fingers along a turf wall outside, tracing the neat, overlapping layers of grass-topped bricks. It's oddly satisfying, like nature's Lego. A good turf wall could last 30 years, sometimes longer if maintained. But cracks appeared frequently. Moisture seeped in. Sections collapsed. And yes, now and then, moss did fall into your soup mid-dinner. Quirky tidbit: some families would intentionally grow specific mosses or lichen on their roofs because they believed it brought good luck, or, more practically, better insulation. And if you were particularly proud of your turf roof, you might invite neighbors over to admire it. Seriously, turf parties were real. BYOB. Bring your own blubber. As you trudge past the outer edge of the house, your boots squelch into frozen mud. The paths aren't paved, just worn earth, slick and treacherous. There's no garden. It's midwinter. Everything's dead or hibernating. You catch sight of a small wooden structure near the back. Is that an outhouse? Maybe. Maybe not. You make a mental note to ask someone later, or just hold it forever. Farther out, you spot a pile of rocks, arranged in a curious half-circle. It's a windbreak, built to protect animals and tools from sudden squalls. These makeshift barriers are everywhere, dotting the landscape like forgotten game pieces from some Viking board game. They're clever, unassuming, and just one of 1,000 subtle ways Icelanders bent nature ever so slightly in their favor. And yet, even with all these workarounds, winter was the enemy, the true villain of turf house life. It lasted roughly 8 to 10 months in some form. Darkness pressed down like a wool blanket. Days passed in twilight. Nights seemed endless. Historians still argue whether this prolonged winter led to the famously gloomy tone of Icelandic sagas, or whether that was just a collective seasonal depression writing itself into legend. You glance up at the sky. Gray. Again. Forever. There's no real sunrise, so much as a slight brightening, like someone turned up the dimmer switch on reality for an hour. Then it's back to dusk. Farmers used candles sparingly, as they were expensive to make. so most chores had to be done by the ghostly gray of the few bright hours available. Even children didn't escape weather duty. They fetched snow melt, gathered seaweed for animal fodder, and checked traps. If they got frostbite, well, hopefully just on the unimportant fingers. You know, the extra ones. Wind roars again, rattling a wooden shutter so violently you expect it to fly off and slap someone across the village. But no one reacts. You realize they're used to this. Wind isn't an event here. It's a personality trait of the island. You pull your cloak tighter, your cheeks tingling from exposure. In your peripheral vision, a neighbor slams a door shut with their shoulder and trudges past you, face wrapped in wool, eyes narrowed to slits. They nod. That's the extent of conversation in weather like this. You nod back. You're one of them now. Back inside, you stomp your boots on a rough reed mat. Snowflakes cling to your eyelashes. The smoky warmth hits you like a hug from a dragon. Someone hands you a wooden bowl of something vaguely edible. You take it without asking. Because in 14th century Iceland, the weather doesn't just determine what you wear or how you build, it shapes your entire way of life, and it has opinions. You're awake again, or maybe you never fully fell asleep. The smoke from the hearth has a way of crawling into your dreams, then waking you with a gentle cough to the face. Morning has broken, or at least cracked slightly. You can tell because the light oozing through the slanted skylight is more of a dull pewter than charcoal gray. Progress. It's time to get dressed, not in a which cozy outfit matches my vibe kind of way. No. Dressing in a 14th century Icelandic turf house is a daily test of patience, upper body strength, and emotional resilience. First, you peel off the damp sheepskin you were sleeping under. It sticks to your face a little. Charming. Then, you brace yourself and dive into your clothes like you're entering battle. Your underlayer is made of coarse wool. It's not itchy. It's weaponized. You slide the tunic over your head and immediately start sweating, despite the chill. That's just the way it works. Wool here is both heating system and punishment. Underpants? Optional and highly debated among historians. Some say Icelanders wore simple linen wraps. Others argue there just wasn't time or fabric for such frivolity. Historians still argue whether people layered their wool intentionally or just threw on whatever was closest and least damp. Next come the breeches. Wide-legged, lumpy, slightly damp from yesterday's snowstorm. They smell faintly of seawater and regret. You tighten them with a leather cord and tug on thick woolen socks. The boots, stiff with age and salt, creak as you pull them on. They're made from sheepskin, sometimes fish leather, sometimes both. Icelandic style tip. If it lived, you can probably wear it. Now the outerwear. A heavier tunic, maybe dyed with whatever natural pigments were handy. Lichen green, faded madder red, or mystery brown. If you're lucky, you get a hooded cloak. If you're unlucky, you get someone else's hooded cloak, which is 2 sizes too small and smells like fish brine and elderberries. A leather belt ties it all together, literally. You loop it around your waist and hang a knife from it. Not because you're planning to duel anyone, but because knives are like medieval smartphones. Everyone carries one, and they're always within arm's reach. And if you're a woman, double the layers. A shift, then an underdress, then an overdress. Laced sides or pinned brooches hold it together, and your hair gets tucked up beneath a woolen cap or kerchief. Married women cover their hair. Unmarried women don't, unless it's freezing, which it always is. So marital status and head warmth constantly clash. By now you feel like a bundled loaf of scratchy bread. You step outside again, and your layers do help. A little. But mostly, they trap the sweat you're already producing from the exhausting task of just getting dressed. Mainstream historical fact: wool production and clothing manufacture were central to medieval Icelandic life. Nearly every household spun wool, wove cloth, and made garments by hand. Homes had small looms, spinning wheels, and enough raw wool to keep the whole family busy during the long winter months. Spindle whorls, those little weights used for spinning, are among the most common artifacts found in turf house ruins. And yes, they wore their clothes a lot. Washing wasn't routine. It was an event. Your tunic might go weeks, maybe months, before it saw water. Instead of scrubbing, they'd air it out, beat it with a stick, or just embrace the aroma. Think of it as developing character. Quirky tidbit: urine, yes, that kind, was sometimes used to clean wool. It contains ammonia, which helped remove grease and soften fibers. So, when someone complimented your cloak's natural finish, it came with a whiff of authenticity. Your fingers fumble at your belt as you try to tie your pouch closed. It's stuffed with a few essentials: a piece of dried fish, some wool thread, maybe a carved bone charm shaped like a seal. You feel prepared, like someone ready to walk 30 minutes through snow just to say hi to their nearest neighbor. Of course, not everyone had a closet full of options. Clothes were labor-intensive and costly to produce. That's why garments were often patched and repurposed endlessly. A cloak might serve 3 generations. A tunic could be taken in, let out, or transformed into a baby blanket. Your clothes didn't say fashion so much as still functioning. You step over a child bundling into a slightly too large coat that probably belonged to a cousin or a goat or both. She's still half asleep, hair sticking up like a hedgehog. Her mother tosses her a scrap of woven wool for mittens. It's not much, but it beats frostbite. The family's elder, gray-haired, quiet, seated near the hearth, wears layers upon layers, and still doesn't seem warm. She's mending socks with bone needles, humming a lullaby that sounds suspiciously like a dirge. You notice her cloak is trimmed with decorative bands, possibly dyed, possibly stolen from a wealthier cousin. No one asks. Outside, the wind tears at your hood. You hunch your shoulders, tuck your chin, and remind yourself you're dressed for this, or at least mostly dressed. There's no warm in Icelandic winter, just less freezing than death. But the sky is starting to brighten, just barely. The clouds above shift from slate to silver, and you can almost believe the sun might show up to work today. You trudge through slushy mud, your woolen layers growing heavier by the step, and you reflect, perhaps too deeply, on the fact that every article of clothing you're wearing was once a labor of days or weeks, from sheep to loom to lumpy boots. And now, here you are, standing in wind so strong it could shave your eyebrows off, fully dressed and still cold. But at least you look historically accurate. You're back inside the turf house now, thawing ever so slightly by the hearth. The smoke from the fire swirls lazily above, clinging to the rafters like it's avoiding chores. Your stomach grumbles, not politely, but with the righteous fury of a medieval appetite. It's breakfast time, which, to be clear, doesn't mean pancakes and orange juice. It means a steaming bowl of, let's hope this isn't what I think it is. You're handed a wooden spoon and a rough-hewn bowl filled with something grayish, lumpy, and suspiciously enthusiastic about existing. It smells vaguely fishy, slightly sour, and entirely like survival. Congratulations. You're eating skyr. Well, something skyr adjacent. Modern skyr is tangy, smooth, and kind of trendy. But back in the 14th century, let's just say refrigeration wasn't a thing, and fermentation was more of a gamble than a science. Your spoon sinks into the thick mass. You take a bite, it tastes sour, nutty, maybe a little alarming. But it's food, high in protein, full of mystery. Alongside it, hard barley bread, dark and dry, like it's been aging in a dragon's attic. You gnaw at it carefully. If your dental plan isn't up to date, you may want to pass. Mainstream historical fact. Icelanders in the Middle Ages relied heavily on dairy, fish, and grain. Barley was the only grain that could reliably grow in the harsh climate, and even then, just barely. Most of it was imported or grown in small patches during brief summer windows. Bread was precious, and often stretched with tree bark, moss, or dried seaweed to make it last longer. Delicious? No. Efficient? Absolutely. Suddenly, someone slaps a chunk of meat onto the table beside you. Boiled lamb, maybe. Or maybe something with more syllables than you're ready for. It's pale, soft, and smells better than it looks. A family member passes around a communal knife, and everyone takes turns carving off bites. The rule is simple. Don't drop it in the ash, and don't lick the blade. Everything else is fair game. You sip from a clay cup filled with sour whey, a byproduct of all that yogurt-making enthusiasm. It's thin, sour, and reportedly refreshing. You are not refreshed. But your ancestors drank this and thought, yep, that'll do. Quirky tidbit. There was something called sursadir hrutspungar, or sour ram's testicles. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Preserved in lactic acid, sliced like cold cuts, and served at feasts. It's unclear if people actually enjoyed it, or if they just dared each other into pretending. The meals are usually one-pot affairs. Stews, soups, and porridges dominate the menu. You peek into a cauldron hanging over the fire and catch a whiff of something bubbling ominously. It's probably grotter, a barley porridge mixed with whatever was available. Saltfish? Check. Bits of fat? Definitely. A rogue carrot if you're lucky. Sometimes seabirds get thrown in. Puffin stew, anyone? Or maybe it's seal. The trick is to not ask questions. Just eat, chew slowly, and keep your expectations in the 14th century. Historians still argue whether medieval Icelanders consumed more fish or dairy overall. Both featured heavily in their diet, depending on region and season. Coastal communities relied on dried fish and seabirds. Inland folks leaned into livestock. What's certain is that food was rarely wasted. Every part of the animal had a role. Stomachs became sausage casings, bones became tools, and bladders, well, those made excellent storage containers. or festive balloons, depending on how weird the party got. You glance at the hearth again. Hanging from a hook is a pot of slatur, a kind of Icelandic blood pudding made with sheep's blood, sweet, and oats or barley. It's thick, dark, and definitely not vegan. A few chunks are ladled into someone's bowl. They nod in grim approval. You quietly slide your own bowl slightly farther away. Despite its simplicity, meals are a big deal. They're moments of warmth, community, and collective chewing. Everyone eats together. Silence is normal. Conversation is sparse and practical. Pass the knife. Is this bird? Did we run out of bark bread again? That sort of thing. Someone starts telling a joke. You don't catch most of it, but the punchline involves a seal, a priest, and a misplaced shoe. Everyone laughs. It's one of those jokes that's probably been around for generations, updated slightly for whoever lost their shoe most recently. The warmth of the hearth seeps into your bones. The food, while unsettling, is filling. Your stomach, once suspicious, now accepts its fate. You lean back against the turf wall, bowl in hand, and feel the gentle lull of full-belly sleepiness. There's something soothing about it. This shared routine, this ancient choreography of chewing and passing and nodding in thanks. A small child offers you a piece of dried fish. It's rock hard and smells like low tide. You accept it anyway, because here, sharing food, no matter how odd, is how people survive, connect, and keep warm in a world that often forgets to be kind. And as you nibble that salty sliver blinking against the hearth smoke, you realize the meals may be humble, the flavors might fight back, but they're enough. And sometimes enough is all you need. Now that your stomach is full of sour whey and chewy barley bricks, nature calls. And unfortunately, 14th century Iceland doesn't offer many options in the way of bathrooms. There's no button to flush, no scented candles, and absolutely no privacy. It's just you, the wind, and a wooden bucket, if you're lucky. You look around the turf house. There's no sign of a chamber pot under the bed platform, but you do notice a faint trail of muddy footprints leading toward a door on the far end. You follow it, ducking through a narrow hallway that smells like wet hay and minor despair. Outside again, your face is instantly whipped by cold air. You squint through the wind and spot a small, wobbly shed squatting behind the turf house like it's ashamed of its own existence. That's your destination, the latrine. Or, as it's known more poetically, the worst place on earth between October and April. The door creaks open. Of course it does. And you're greeted by a shocking lack of insulation. It's essentially a wooden bench with a hole in it, perched above a pit that nobody has cleaned in recent memory. The air is crisp, pungent, and aggressively personal. A cold draft blasts upward from the pit, giving new meaning to the phrase, chilling to the core. You do your business as quickly as humanly possible while trying to keep your multiple layers from falling into the abyss. There's no toilet paper, obviously. Instead, there's a small pile of moss, maybe some hay, and, if someone was feeling generous, an old, frayed wool scrap. Your standards, once high, have now recalibrated to, will this scratch or freeze less? Mainstream historical fact. Many Icelandic turf homes didn't have an indoor toilet. People used outdoor privies or designated waste pits, often shared by the household or even a few neighbors. In extreme weather, or the middle of the night, people sometimes used buckets or chamber pots inside. which were then dumped the next morning. Delightful. You stumble out of the outhouse, grateful just to have survived without frostbite in an unspeakable place. But your hygienic journey isn't over. You now need to wash your hands, or at least pretend to. There's a wooden basin near the side of the turf house, filled with ice-rimmed water and a sliver of what looks like fat-covered soap. You dunk your hands in. Your skin instantly regrets this. The water is colder than your future and bites like a small, angry god. You splash, scrub, and vow to never take running water for granted again. Quirky tidbit. Icelanders sometimes used lye made from wood ash as an early form of soap. It worked well enough but could cause irritation if left on too long. Some households used urine instead, which, when stored and aged into ammonia, served as a kind of disinfectant. So yes, people were clean, just in ways modern noses might politely decline to discuss. You dry your hands on your cloak. They remain red and slightly tingly. But congratulations, you've survived the Icelandic bathroom experience. And now you understand why so much of life back then involved holding things in. Back inside, someone is scooping ash from the hearth with a carved horn ladle, muttering something about soot buildup. You notice a pile of charcoal and dung bricks stacked neatly beside the fire. Dried animal droppings, as it turns out, make excellent fuel. Renewable, abundant, and surprisingly efficient. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the house warm and the soup weirdly smoky. Historians still argue whether turf house residents had separate areas for bathing and washing, or simply used the same basins for everything. Some suggest that a small wooden tub would be brought inside occasionally, filled with heated water for a rare full-body scrub. Others believe sponge baths, if you can call them that, were more common. Either way, you're not getting squeaky clean. You're just getting less itchy. Children run past you barefoot, laughing, despite the chill. Their faces are smeared with ash and porridge. One of them sneezes with alarming force into her sleeve. She is now, officially, cleaner than you. Later in the day, you notice someone scrubbing clothes on a rock by the stream. They beat the fabric rhythmically, occasionally rinsing it in the near-freezing water. The wind doesn't care. The fabric freezes almost as fast as it's cleaned. These laundry sessions are rare, done more out of necessity than routine. Clothing is precious, and washing too often can damage the wool. You try to imagine doing this weekly, then daily, then stop for your own mental well-being. There's also a certain pragmatism to hygiene here. Nobody expects to smell like a bouquet. The goal is to be functional, not fragrant. Everyone smells vaguely like sheep and smoke. And that's fine. That's the baseline. And lice? Oh, they're part of the household. Everyone has them. Combs carved from bone are passed around like communal toothbrushes, and delousing is both a chore and a form of bonding. You sit by the fire, picking through someone's hair with a look of patient misery. If the lice could talk, they'd probably ask for rent. You scratch your arm absent-mindedly. Was that an itch or a tiny roommate? Best not to ask. The good news? Cold weather slows bacteria growth. The bad news? You still smell like a dairy product that lost its way. But no one notices. Everyone's nose has long since checked out. By evening, you're settling back into your corner of the turf house, a little dirtier, a little wiser. The air is still smoky, your hands still sting from the cold water, and your skin still holds the memory of that outhouse gust. But you survived. In 14th century Iceland, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's next to the fire. And that's good enough. You've eaten, you've endured the bathroom situation, and you've managed to layer yourself into a walking wool burrito. Now it's time to work. And by work, we don't mean checking your email or casually browsing medieval TikTok, which would probably just be goats sneezing and long panning shots of moss. No, this is farm work, and it starts before the sun gets over its chronic winter depression. The hearth fire is stoked with fresh dung bricks. The smell of productivity. A horn of sour whey is passed around like a grim medieval espresso shot. People begin pulling on boots, wrapping extra cloaks, and mumbling the 14th century equivalent of, "Let's get this over with." You step outside again. The wind greets you like a jealous ex, loud, bitter, and extremely committed. But there's no time to dwell on that. Chores wait for no one, and certainly not you. Today's main task? Churning butter. You're led to a small shed beside the turf house. Inside, a wooden churn, a heavy lid, and a pail of cream that's been left to sour slightly. The air smells like old yogurt and elbow grease. You're handed a plunger stick and told to get churning. This is not a delicate task. It's a full-body workout. You plunge the stick down, then pull it up, over and over again, until your arms scream and your soul exits your body through your armpits. Everyone in the family takes turns, even kids, especially kids. Mainstream historical fact: dairy production was central to Icelandic farm life. Butter wasn't just a food item, it was a form of currency, status, and survival. Families stored it in barrels buried underground to preserve it through the winter. The quality of your butter could literally determine how well you bartered that season. Quirky tidbit: there was a version of preserved butter known as rancid butter. And yes, it was exactly what it sounds like. Left to ferment underground for months, even years, it developed a strong, pungent aroma and a taste that, depending on who you ask, ranged from acquired to life-altering trauma. It was still valuable. Some say the stinkier it was, the better the trade deal. Others say those people were just too cold to care. With your arms now jelly, you pass the churn to someone else and head out to the barn. Barn is a generous word. It's a low, attached part of the turf house, partly insulated and partly just a roof over a situation. You push open the creaking door and are instantly hit by a wave of animal heat, damp straw, and something that smells like a Viking foot spa. Chickens cluck indignantly. A few sheep stare at you like you've interrupted their private book club. A cow shifts in her stall, unimpressed by your city energy. Your job now? Muck the stalls. You grab a wooden shovel and start scooping straw and manure into a woven basket. It's not glamorous, but hey, at least it's warm in here. Warmer than the living quarters, honestly. The animals radiate heat like small furry radiators, and their constant breathing fills the space with fog and livestock gossip. Historians still argue whether turf house barns were considered separate rooms or just very lively hallways. Some households integrated livestock directly into the main structure for heat and convenience, while others kept a bit of distance, usually about a shovel's length. You finish mucking and check off your next chore: feeding the animals. This involves a mix of dried grass, seaweed, and fermented hay. You throw handfuls into troughs, occasionally dodging a goat that thinks your belt looks edible. Icelandic animals were tough, adapted to withstand cold, navigate rocky terrain, and survive on what would make modern livestock riot. The sheep are particularly hardy, stocky, woolly, and full of side-eye. You reach out to pet one and receive a gentle headbutt in return. Love comes in headbutts here. Back outside, you're given a basket and pointed toward the shoreline. Your task: gather seaweed. It's used for animal feed, fertilizer, and, in truly desperate times, people food. The walk is cold and slippery, the ground uneven. You almost lose a boot in the bog, but a child half your size grabs your arm with the strength of someone who's done this since birth. You collect the slimy strands, your fingers turning red. A gull screams overhead, probably mocking you. The sea crashes against black volcanic rocks in the distance. The scenery is hauntingly beautiful, but you are very much distracted by your wet socks. By the time you return, the basket heavy and your calves sore, the turf house is already buzzing with new activity. Someone's carding wool by the fire, teasing it into fluffy clouds. Another person is spinning thread with practiced ease. Even the children are busy, mending nets, scraping hides, sorting feathers. In 14th century Iceland, every chore was essential. Leisure time was limited, and survival required all hands on deck, literally. There was no such thing as off-duty. Your free time came at night, by firelight, when your body was too tired to move, and all you could manage was listening to a saga and slowly chewing a piece of jerky. You sit down, finally, beside the hearth again. Your hands smell like seaweed, your boots squish ominously, and you're fairly certain you have straw in your socks. But there's something deeply grounding about the rhythm of these tasks, about how nothing is done for the sake of keeping busy, but because every small thing, every stitch, every shovel of muck matters. You're not just surviving. You're part of the machine that keeps this small, smoky, wind-battered world turning. And weirdly, that feels kind of nice. You sit down for a quick rest, thinking you've earned it. And maybe you have. But before you can even sigh properly, a chicken flaps onto your lap like it owns the place, which, in a way, it kind of does. Welcome to the part of turf house life they don't write poems about, sharing your home with livestock. You see, in this particular chapter of your Icelandic life, you're not just living with your human family. You're also cohabiting with an entire cast of loud, smelly, and uncomfortably close animal roommates. Chickens, sheep, goats, cows, even the occasional horse, all under one mossy roof, living together in slightly chaotic, slightly smelly harmony. And yes, the house smells like what you're picturing. A rich aroma of old wool, stale milk, and warm dung. It's the scent of survival, of practical architecture, and of a society that understood one simple truth. Body heat is body heat, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. You hear a snort. You turn. A cow is standing in the corner of the badstofa, blinking slowly at you like it's judging your life choices. She's not technically in the living space, but there's no real door between you and her. Just a wooden partition and some deeply passive-aggressive eye contact. Mainstream historical fact. Turf houses were often designed with an attached stable area, or fjós, allowing livestock and humans to share warmth. This design was especially common in the long, brutal Icelandic winters, when temperatures could plummet and fuel was scarce. The heat from several large animals could raise the temperature in the living space significantly, at the cost of odor, noise, and the occasional hoof in the hallway. A chicken hops up onto the wooden bench beside you. It pecks at your sleeve. You gently move it off, but it returns, more determined. There is no peace. You accept your new reality. Quirky tidbit. In some houses, small animals like chickens were actually kept inside the sleeping areas at night, not just for heat, but for safety. Foxes and birds of prey posed a constant threat. And since locking a chicken in a coop was essentially an invitation to an Icelandic wildlife buffet, it was safer to let them roost near the hearth. Cozy? Yes. Quiet? Absolutely not. A child runs by holding a piglet like a wiggly loaf of bread. You try to ask why. The child just laughs and disappears through a smoke-stained curtain. You make a mental note to never ask questions again. Later, you're assigned to help move hay from the storage loft to the stable. You climb a creaky wooden ladder and enter the hay loft, a low, dusty space packed with dried grass and the ghosts of 1,000 sneezes. You begin shoving hay down to the animals below. It floats gently through the air like itchy confetti. Someone sneezes. A goat bleats. A very large cow lets out a sound that seems to come from the deepest pit of its soul. You nod. Just another morning. Historians still argue whether this close proximity between humans and animals led to better health outcomes due to shared warmth, or worse outcomes from the spread of zoonotic diseases. Truth is, probably both. People got used to their animals, sometimes too used to them. There are medieval poems that refer to sheep as soft pillows, and not always in a metaphorical sense. You're handed a crude broom and asked to sweep the shared hallway. Again. There's straw, feathers, the occasional suspicious puddle. You do your best, but the moment you finish, a goat walks through and undoes your hard work with a single arrogant step. You glare. It blinks. The goat wins. There's a strange kind of intimacy in this arrangement. These animals aren't just tools or meat. They're part of the household. Named, known, cared for. The children have favorite chickens. One old woman keeps a sheep she's too attached to ever shear again. The cow has its own corner and grumbles if someone else sits there. You start to see them less as livestock and more as stubborn, four-legged roommates who chew a lot and pay no rent. You're finally given a break, so you sit near the hearth again. You try to sip a little hot broth, but you're quickly interrupted by a chicken pecking at your bowl. You sigh and give her a piece. She nods like she expected no less. The fire crackles, someone's carding wool nearby, and a sheep sticks its head over the partition to sniff your hair. You're annoyed, slightly itchy, and somehow still cold, but you're also part of something ancient and oddly peaceful. Here, in this smoky, moss-walled house full of bleating, clucking, snorting, and sneezing, you begin to realize that medieval Icelandic life was communal in a way most modern people can't quite grasp. You didn't just live with your family, you lived with everything that sustained you. No boundaries, no silence. Just the eternal hum of shared breath. And somewhere in that hum, amid the thud of hooves, the whisper of feathers, and the low mutter of old voices, you feel yourself settling into the rhythm of the turf house. You're not visiting anymore. You live here now, and yes, the goat is still staring. You wake up disoriented. Again. It's not that you slept poorly. It's that you have no idea what time it is. The dim gray light filtering through the turf house's tiny window could be dawn, dusk, or just a particularly enthusiastic cloud. Time, in 14th century Iceland, is less of a schedule and more of a vague suggestion. You shuffle over to the entrance, peering outside. The sky is a deep iron gray, or possibly light charcoal, or maybe it's just your eyeballs giving up. There's snow on the ground, but not fresh. It's hard-packed and crusty, like it's been there since forever. You inhale. The air is crisp, sharp, and indistinguishable from the last 12 days of weather. And now you begin to understand what people meant when they described Icelandic winters as long, not just in months, but in feeling. The sun, when it bothers to rise, appears for maybe 3 hours. Then it's gone again, like an introvert at a house party. Mainstream historical fact. Iceland's latitude means extreme variations in daylight. In midwinter, parts of the island get as little as 3 to 4 hours of usable light per day. In some northern regions, the sun never fully rises. It just hovers under the horizon, painting the sky with vague pinks and blues like a watercolor artist who gave up halfway. So, how do you tell time? Well, you don't. There are no clocks, no wristwatches, and certainly no phones glowing with friendly numbers. Time is tracked by tasks. When the fire's been going long enough to warm the stones, or when the goats start yelling. Some families use sundials, but let's be real, those are pretty useless when the sun's off on vacation for 3 months. You spot a woman outside, squinting at the sky and holding her hand at arm's length, measuring the angle of light with practiced nonchalance. This is called solskin smat, literally sunshine measuring, a kind of eyeballed solar math. It's surprisingly effective, assuming the sun is visible at all, which today it is not. Historians still argue whether medieval Icelanders had standard timekeeping methods or whether each household functioned on its own rhythm. Some evidence suggests that bells were used in monastic communities to signal prayer times, but out here, in the rural reaches, time was an idea, not a tool. You head back inside. The hearth glows weakly, and someone's already reheating yesterday's fish stew. A sleepy voice murmurs, "Morning," followed by a shrug, then, "Maybe." Chores begin regardless. Bread dough is kneaded and set by the hearth to rise, slowly, reluctantly. The livestock are fed. Wool is spun. Tools are sharpened. It's comforting, in a way, that life goes on whether or not the sun shows up. Quirky tidbit. Some Icelandic households marked time with candles, not the kind with scents like Arctic rain or Viking beard, but tall tallow candles carefully measured to burn down over fixed intervals. A family might say, "Let's churn butter for 2 fingers of candle," or, "It's been half a candle since sunset." Functional, poetic, and flammable. But even with tricks and systems, you feel it, that slow descent into timelessness. When days blend into each other, and you start to mark the passage of time not by hours or minutes, but by how many bowls of stew you've eaten since last Tuesday, or last whenever. You find yourself staring into the hearth for long periods. It's not boredom, exactly. It's a kind of seasonal surrender. The fire flickers, someone hums a song that may be a lullaby or a dirge, and the smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, as if time itself has slowed to watch. Outside, children play in the snow, shouting and slipping on the icy ground. One child has fashioned a sled from a piece of driftwood and is now racing a sheep downhill. The sheep wins, of course. It has better traction. Inside, a man oils a wooden tool and remarks casually, "Feels like Wednesday." No one corrects him. It might be, or not. It doesn't matter. There are no appointments, no trains, no deadlines, only the rhythm of survival. You try to imagine living like this for months at a time, and then you stop imagining, because you are living it now. Your inner clock has been rewired. You no longer care what hour it is, only whether it's light enough to walk to the stream without tripping over a frozen chicken. Someone hands you a task, twisting skeins of wool into yarn. It's oddly satisfying. Your fingers find the rhythm easily. Twist, pull, wrap, over and over. Minutes pass, or maybe hours. It doesn't matter. Outside, the light dims again. The sun has given up for the day. You don't blame it. The candle is burning low now, one finger left, maybe two. It's almost time for the evening meal, or maybe it just feels like it. You settle in by the fire again, your body slowly sinking to the ancient, invisible metronome of turf house life. There is no schedule, no clock, only the hum of voices, the crackle of wood, the wind pressing at the walls like a distant ocean, and the steady, constant rhythm of living without time. And weirdly, you start to like it. You wake up to a familiar feeling, crusty eyelids, dry throat, and a vague suspicion that your entire body has been lightly smoked. Ah, yes, it's bath day, or at least it might be. It's been a while. How long exactly? Hard to say. You stopped keeping track around the fourth bowl of fermented dairy and the third lice inspection. But now someone's muttering something about warming water, and there's a wooden tub in the middle of the room that wasn't there yesterday. Things are happening. Today, you're going to bathe, or at least attempt a medieval approximation of it. Mainstream historical fact. Bathing in 14th century Iceland was not a daily or even weekly event. Depending on the season, resources, and general level of grime, most people bathed once every few weeks, sometimes once a month. Winter, in particular, made hygiene more of a hopeful suggestion than a commitment. You watch as water is carried in from the stream, bucket by frozen bucket. It's heated slowly over the hearth in a large iron pot, the process interrupted by a sheep who keeps trying to sniff it. Finally, the water is warm enough, not hot, just less painful, and poured into the tub. It's a little wider than a barrel and smells faintly of previous bathers. You undress awkwardly, trying to maintain some dignity in a world where everyone shares everything. Someone hands you a rag. There's no soap, at least not in the modern sense. What you get is a lump of homemade soap made from animal fat and lye. It's grainy. It smells like sadness. But it does the job. You climb in. The tub is tight. The water is cloudy. The bottom is a mystery. but it's warm, and it wraps around you like a tired hug. For a moment, you close your eyes and pretend you're in a spa. A very rustic, livestock-adjacent spa, where the towels are made of wool and the spa music is just someone coughing in the corner. Quirky tidbit: hot springs were sometimes used for bathing in medieval Iceland. Natural geothermal pools were a luxury, mostly enjoyed by those who lived near them. Some sagas mention characters soaking in warm waters with their friends, offering a rare glimpse into the casual hangout side of Icelandic life. If you lived far from a spring, though, tough luck. Your tub was a bucket, and your bubbles were non-existent. As you bathe, you're offered a comb. It's carved from bone and looks like it could double as a weapon. You run it through your hair, feeling it catch on tangles, knots, and possibly colonies of lice. Someone offers to help you delouse. You accept, because dignity died somewhere between the fermented fish and the lice sauna. Historians still argue whether medieval Icelanders considered lice a normal part of life or something to be actively fought. Evidence suggests both. Combs, nitpicking routines, and delousing sessions were common, especially among women and children. But complete eradication? That was fantasy. The water cools quickly. Someone throws a towel at you. It's scratchy and smells faintly of goat, but it's dry. You dry off and step out, grateful and slightly raw. Your skin feels tight. Your hair is wet. You're cleanish. You put your clothes back on. Yes, the same ones. You only have a few outfits and they're all made of regretful wool. But still, you feel better, lighter. You catch your reflection in a bit of polished metal and blink. Not bad. Medieval Instagram might double tap this. Later that day, you help clean the tub. The water is dumped outside, steaming as it hits the snow. A chicken slips in it and walks away indignant. The tub is scrubbed with straw and rinsed with cold water, ready for the next person. Not everyone bathes on the same day. It's a rotating ritual. Some families save bathing for special occasions, marriages, births, or the seasonal livestock festival where everyone pretends to be clean for a week. You notice a bundle of herbs hanging from the rafters. Lavender, maybe? Or something vaguely floral. Some women boil it into a rinse for their hair or a foot soak. You ask to try it. The result? Your hair smells slightly less like dairy. Progress. Later that evening, the hearth is warm and your skin is glowing slightly from the rare scrub. A few people sit close by, braiding each other's hair, inspecting each other's scalps like attentive baboons. It's weirdly wholesome. You scratch your leg absent-mindedly and pause. Was that a phantom itch? A memory? You don't know. But it doesn't matter. You've had a bath. You've made it to the rare, fleeting state of Icelandic medieval cleanliness. And as you sit by the fire, wrapped in your slightly less crusty cloak, you realize something important. You're not just surviving. You're officially fresh by 14th century standards. Don't get used to it. The next bath is probably a month away. Evening creeps in again. Not that you notice the day passing. It's hard to mark the hours when light is just a temporary rumor. But now the hearth glows brighter than the sky, casting flickering shadows on the turf walls. Dinner is done. The animals are fed. And you're finally allowed to sit down and do what Icelanders have been doing for centuries when the cold settles in and the darkness grows heavy. You tell stories, not just any stories, sagas. The badstofa fills with the low murmur of voices as everyone settles into their corners. Some lie back on sheepskin-covered bedboards. Others perch on benches or lean against the mossy wall. You sit close to the fire, bowl in hand, filled with a dessert-like porridge that's more comfort than cuisine. It tastes faintly of butter, barley, and whatever was left in the pantry that wasn't nailed down. A boy picks up a carved stick and taps it twice against the floor. That's the signal. Tonight's saga is Grettir's Saga, a local favorite. It has everything: Vikings, ghosts, outlaw life, wrestling matches, curses, and one very awkward scene involving a haunted farm. It begins the way all great sagas begin, with lineage. Lots of lineage. You try to follow along, but by the third Thorstein son of Asmund the Grey, your brain fogs like a winter window. Mainstream historical fact: Icelandic sagas are a cornerstone of the island's literary legacy. Written down mostly in the 13th and 14th centuries, they preserve oral histories, myths, and heroic tales from as far back as the 9th century. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were the cultural backbone of a people who had little sunlight, but an endless love for storytelling. The man reciting the saga speaks slowly, rhythmically, letting the words hang in the smoky air. He gestures occasionally, pausing for dramatic effect. People listen, rapt, even though they've heard it a dozen times before. That's the thing about sagas. They don't get old. They get bigger in the telling, like fish or family legends, or that story about the time the cow got loose and chased the priest across the fjord. Quirky tidbit: saga storytelling wasn't just an adult pastime. Children were expected to learn them, remember the names, recite key parts. It was entertainment, education, and social glue all rolled into one. Sometimes families even kept written copies hidden away, on calfskin vellum, of course, for the literate to read aloud by lamplight. The fire pops loudly, and someone mutters that it's a bad omen. Another person counters that it means the ghost in the chimney is pleased. You don't know who to believe, so you sip your porridge and pretend you didn't hear anything. The saga continues. Grettir the Strong is fighting something in the dark. A creature. A revenant. It's clearly not going well. The storyteller's voice lowers. The room stills. Someone coughs. A log shifts, sending a burst of embers into the air. The children pull their wool blankets tighter around their shoulders. You can't help it. You lean forward. This part always gets them. He defeats the ghost, of course, but not without cost. Grettir is cursed, exiled, alone. Historians still argue whether sagas were purely fictional or based on real events. Some point to geographical accuracy and historical names. Others argue that these were moral tales designed to teach courage, honor, or the dangers of being really, really bad at making friends. When the story ends, there's silence. Not because it's awkward, but because no one wants to break the spell. The silence feels right, like a second ending. The fire crackles. Outside, the wind moans. A chicken shifts somewhere in the shadows. Then, someone else picks up the thread. A shorter story this time, about a troll that lives under a waterfall. He's lonely. he plays the flute. One day, he falls in love with a sheep that turns out to be a disguised elf. Everyone laughs. You don't understand half of it, but the tone is warm and mischievous, like someone telling a joke with 1,000 years of mileage. You're invited to share a tale. You panic. What could you say? You search your memory for anything remotely saga-worthy. Then, you remember the story of a friend getting lost in a supermarket for 45 minutes. You tweak it, replace supermarket with fial market, and suddenly you're weaving your own modern mini-saga. They love it. A woman claps. Someone offers you another spoonful of porridge. You are now officially part of the turf house's oral tradition. As the night deepens, the stories soften. Some are whispered. Others are sung. A lullaby drifts through the smoky air, lilting and low. A saga fragment is murmured like a prayer. And you realize that these stories are more than entertainment. They are memory, survival. Culture passed through the dark, from mouth to ear, heart to heart. No paper needed, just a fire, some warm bodies, and a shared reverence for tales that blur the line between truth and legend. Eventually, your eyes grow heavy. The saga fades. The hearth burns low. You pull your cloak tighter and lie back. Somewhere outside, the wind howls. Inside, someone starts a new story. You smile into your blanket. This one's about a goat. Of course, you wake to the sound of bells. Not the pleasant kind that signal holiday cheer or an angel getting its wings. These are church bells, and they mean one thing. It's time to go act holy in a building that is very much not warm. The bells echo through the valley, bouncing off rock, snow, and the occasional unimpressed cow. You yawn, stretch, and try to mentally prepare for what is both a spiritual experience and a weekly social spectacle. Today is Sunday, which means Mass, a lot of kneeling on cold stone, and an excellent opportunity to catch up on who's feuding with whom over sheep. You dress as quickly as wool physics allow. Your good tunic is slightly less frayed than the others, and you give it a shake like that'll remove the smell of pickled fish and hearth smoke. It doesn't. You try anyway. Outside, the snow crunches underfoot as you trudge toward the small turf church nestled into the hillside. It's barely distinguishable from the surrounding land, just a modest steeple poking through the mossy slope like a shy finger pointing at heaven. Mainstream historical fact: medieval Icelandic churches were often small, turf-covered structures with wooden frames. Christianity officially arrived in Iceland around 1000 AD, and by the 14th century, most communities had their own parish churches, simple, humble, and cold enough to make your teeth contemplate quitting your mouth. You push open the heavy wooden door. The smell hits first: candle wax, damp wool, and centuries of slightly guilty souls. The pews are rough, narrow, and not designed for comfort. You shuffle into a seat next to someone who may or may not have cursed you out during butter churning last week. It's fine. You're here to forgive, or at least to look like you might. The priest enters, draped in heavy robes, face solemn, beard majestic. He clears his throat and begins in Latin, which you understand approximately none of. That's okay. No one else does either. The murmured prayers roll over you like the wind, cold, consistent, vaguely threatening. Quirky tidbit. Latin was the official language of the Catholic Church, but most Icelanders didn't speak it. Instead, they followed along based on cues: when to kneel, when to stand, when to pretend they hadn't just drifted off during the third Ave Maria. Some churches eventually incorporated Old Norse into services, but for the most part, the priest could have been reciting baking recipes and no one would know. You kneel on the cold floor. Your knees regret this instantly. You stand, sit, kneel again. It's a holy aerobics routine. During the sermon, you sneak glances around the room. There's the girl who lost her scarf in the stream last week, the man with the nice boots everyone's been whispering about, and in the front row, yes, there he is, the local gossip magnate, Thorfinn. Thorfinn isn't saying anything, but he doesn't need to. His eyebrows alone are capable of communicating deeply scandalous information. You watch as he leans slightly to the side, whispers something to his neighbor, and both of them glance dramatically at the priest's cousin. You lean in. This is the true liturgy. Historians still argue whether churches functioned primarily as religious centers or as hubs of social life. Evidence supports both. People attended Mass out of obligation and devotion, yes, but also to exchange news, arrange marriages, settle disputes, and check who wore the same tunic 3 Sundays in a row. The service continues. Someone sings. Badly. A baby cries. A chicken that snuck in flaps indignantly and is promptly escorted out by a child who clearly regrets everything. Eventually, the priest raises his hands in blessing, and everyone breathes a collective sigh of relief. It's over. Spiritually uplifted, or at least physically cold, you exit the church and immediately form the aftermass cluster, aka the ancient Icelandic version of the comment section. Did you hear about Gudrun's goat? Sheep. It was a sheep. No, it was definitely a goat. It kicked a hole through their turf wall. I heard it spoke. It's all here. Feuds, flirtations, quiet judgments about tunic length. Religion might bring you to church, but the drama keeps you from leaving early. You're handed a cup of something warm, maybe mead, maybe sour whey with herbs, and you sip slowly as the gossip drifts around you like falling snowflakes. One woman mentions a dream she had about a burning fjord and says it's a sign. Someone else mutters that it's just indigestion from bad sausage. You nod solemnly. You're part of the analysis now. After a while, you and your group begin the slow trek back to the turf house. It's quieter now, the kind of silence that comes after shared ritual. The sun, miraculously, peeks out for a few minutes. You savor it. Everyone does. People stop mid-step, eyes closed, just soaking in the pale gold warmth like half-frozen lizards. Back inside the house, boots are kicked off. Cloaks are hung near the hearth. The gossip continues in hushed tones while food is prepared. You lie back on your sleeping platform, thinking about the priest's sermon, what little you understood of it, and whether Thorfinn's eyebrow raise meant that or that. You smile. You're clean-ish, forgiven-ish, and definitely caught up on village politics. Holy Day? Absolutely. You wake up and realize something chilling. Not emotionally, but literally. The frost has crept inside the turf house. Your breath fogs in front of your face, and when you shift under your sheepskin blanket, it crackles. Not from age or grime, though fair, but from a delicate film of ice that's formed along the edges. Welcome to the real heart of winter in 14th century Iceland, the part of the year when even the fire seems unsure it wants to keep going. You sit up slowly. The smoke hole above the hearth has iced over, so the room is filling with low-lying smoke and bad intentions. Someone stirs the fire with a poker and mutters something in Old Norse that sounds suspiciously like a threat. You agree. Mainstream historical fact. Iceland's winters were notoriously harsh, long, and psychologically taxing. Some regions had snow on the ground up to 8 months a year. The darkness compounded things. In the depths of winter, there could be only 2 or 3 hours of weak daylight per day. Seasonal depression wasn't a diagnosis. It was just called life. The fire eventually sputters into reluctant life. People start moving slowly, stiff from cold and too many nights curled like shrimp. You drink hot broth for breakfast, not because it's a treat, but because it's the warmest thing in the house besides the cow in the next room. Layers go on. Tunics over tunics, cloaks over tunics, a scarf wrapped so tightly around your face that you feel like a sentient wool ball with anxiety. Today's big task? Surviving winter without going mad. You help shovel snow from the entrance. Not that it helps much. Every gust of wind blows it back like nature's personal joke. You stamp it down instead. Good enough. Quirky tidbit. In the deepest part of winter, families often closed off sections of their turf house to conserve heat. They lived in just 1 or 2 rooms, huddling together with the animals for warmth. This strategy, known as inestada, essentially turned the home into a human and livestock thermos. Outside, the wind screams like a banshee. It shakes the turf walls, rattles the shutters, and makes a wooden beam creak in a tone that definitely suggests haunting more than weather. The snow drifts are so high that you could lose a sheep in one, and people did. Entire flocks would vanish in sudden storms. Some were found days later. Some were never found at all. You go check on the animals in the stable. It's warmer in there than the house. The cows exhale clouds into the air like slow-moving steam engines. A goat presses its head against your hip, looking smug. You consider moving in. The animals are fed. Their water is thawed. The door is reinforced with extra wood because if the wind picks up any more, it might try to steal the whole barn. Again, historians still argue whether medieval Icelanders stockpiled enough food for winter successfully or if famine was a regular event. Evidence from sagas and archaeological digs suggests both. In good years, stores of dried fish, cured meats, grain, and root vegetables got families through. In bad years, people stretched what little they had, and stretched the definition of food. Back inside, the household settles into winter rhythm. The looms are brought out. Spindles whirl quietly. Someone is sewing. Again, always sewing. Clothes wear out faster in winter, when wool stays damp and everyone is constantly layering, rubbing, and slipping on ice. You're asked to help. Your stitches are uneven, your knots questionable, but everyone's too cold to care. You poke your finger and yelp. No one flinches. Blood is just part of the process now. Someone tells a story about a time a roof collapsed under snow weight. Everyone nods solemnly. Then someone else tells a better story about a man who got stuck in an outhouse for 3 days during a blizzard and came out declaring war on snow. That one gets actual laughter. Humor becomes vital. Not because winter is funny, but because it has to be. You joke or you crack. Even the sheep seem to sense this. One of them has learned how to knock over a jug of milk, and it's now a household event. A betting pool has formed. You bet 2 buttons and a fishbone it'll do it again before sundown. It does. You collect your winnings with pride. Evenings are slow. The fire is fed constantly. The candle is lit. People take turns reading from scraps of old texts, usually sagas, sometimes religious tracts, once a poem about someone's lost mitten that made everyone a little emotional. Outside, the snow piles higher. The world shrinks to a few walkable meters. You haven't seen the sun in days, and the moon looks like it's considering early retirement. Your body has adjusted to the lack of daylight, but your mind occasionally asks, "Is this forever?" It's not, but it feels like it. You sleep earlier. You eat more often. You stop worrying about the date or time. You mark the passing of the weeks by how many logs are left, or how often someone says, "I think I saw light this morning." Then, one day, it's there. The light. Just a sliver, just a flicker, but undeniably golden and new. It cuts through the frost-hazed window like a sword, and everyone stops what they're doing. No one says a word. No one needs to. You all just sit in that patch of sunlight for a moment. Eyes closed, faces turned like worshippers. And breathe. There's a strange shift in the air today, not in temperature, it's still deeply freezing, but in energy. People are whispering. Someone's tied a piece of carved bone to the doorframe. A child refuses to walk past the fireplace unless they're carrying an iron nail in their pocket. Congratulations. You've made it to the superstition phase of turf house life. Now, it's not that people here are superstitious exactly. It's just that they believe that invisible forces govern the weather, livestock, illness, crop growth, nightmares, and the cow that won't stop looking at them funny. You know, normal stuff. Mainstream historical fact. Iceland in the 14th century was officially Christian, but Old Norse beliefs and local superstitions never really left. They simply adapted. People still carved magical staves called galdrastafir, whispered protection charms, and believed in hidden folk, huldufolk, that lived in the rocks, hills, and shadows of the land. This morning, you overhear a heated debate over whether the strange moaning last night was the wind, or the spirit of a drowned fisherman who once sold a cursed sheep. The consensus? It was definitely the cursed sheep. You nod like this makes sense. You're asked to help hang dried herbs above the hearth. Angelica, mugwort, juniper. They're said to ward off illness, nightmares, and the occasional overly curious elf. As you hang them, the old woman of the house spits into the fire. 3 times. For luck. You don't ask questions anymore. You just follow suit. Quirky tidbit. Icelanders believed in a wide range of magical symbols and wise folk who could heal, curse, or predict the future. Some would inscribe runes into bones or driftwood, carry amulets, or bury offerings at crossroads to appease unseen forces. Even Christianity couldn't fully replace this complex spiritual system. It just had to learn to coexist. Later, you're invited to watch a ritual, a simple one, but still oddly powerful. The father of the household draws a galdrastafur, a magic stave, on the door with soot. It looks like a cross between a snowflake and a compass. It's meant to keep away bad weather. You're pretty sure the weather doesn't care, but the gesture is sincere, and somehow the wind does seem to die down afterward. You help the others carry stones to a nearby field. They're stacking them into a small circle, what they call an elf hill. No one disturbs it, ever. A neighbor once tried to dig through one and broke his leg the next day. Coincidence? That's not how turf house logic works. The lesson? Don't mess with the elves. Inside, someone's whispering over a bowl of milk. They're testing for omens. If the milk clots unnaturally, it's a bad sign. If it stays smooth, you're good. It curdles slightly on one side. People frown. The goat gives you a look. Again, you nod like this is completely normal. Historians still argue whether supernatural beliefs like these were truly widespread or simply exaggerated in later folklore. Some say they were practiced quietly, especially in more remote areas. Others believe they were woven into daily life as tightly as wool into a winter tunic. The line between religion and magic is blurry here. People attend Mass, pray to God, and also bury bread crusts in the snow to keep trolls from stealing their dreams. It's not contradictory. It's comprehensive. Even the architecture reflects this belief. Doors are often built facing a certain direction to ward off evil. Some homes have protective runes carved above their lintels, and when a new turf house is built, a piece of bread and a coin might be buried in the foundation to feed the spirits and pay for peace. You sit by the fire that evening, watching shadows dance on the mossy wall. Someone starts to hum a song, a lullaby, but eerie. It tells of a woman who wandered into the hills and never returned. Except she did. Except she wasn't quite herself anymore. Everyone listens, then looks around nervously. Someone throws more dung on the fire, just in case. A dog growls at the door. No one opens it, not until morning. Before bed, the children each place a carved stone under their pillows. You ask why. To keep the dreams quiet, one of them says. You're handed a small rune-marked charm to hold as you sleep. It's smooth, bone-white, and warm from someone else's hand. You tuck it into your blanket without question. And as you lie there, listening to the wind press against the turf walls, you understand something that doesn't need historical context. When the world outside is cold, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, believing in charms, signs, and invisible protectors isn't weakness. It's survival. And maybe, just maybe, that rune is doing something. Because tonight, for the first time in a long while, you sleep without dreaming. You wake to an unsettling sound. Not the usual coughing, goat bleating, or wind rattling the turf walls like it's trying to get in for tea. No, this sound is much more alarming. A roof creaking in a way that suggests it may not be interested in being a roof anymore. You sit up quickly. So does everyone else. A few people rush outside. You follow, heart thudding faster than it probably should in this much wool. The snow has piled high overnight, blanketing the house like a personal vendetta. One corner of the turf has begun to slump. Nothing dramatic yet, but it's definitely sagging, like a weary eyebrow made of moss and regret. Mainstream historical fact: turf roofs, while excellent for insulation, required constant maintenance, especially in winter. Heavy snow or ice buildup could cause collapses, leaks, or worse. Families often assigned daily tasks to monitor, patch, and clear snow from the turf structure, particularly after storms or sudden thaws. Today's task, then, is obvious. Shovel the roof before it shovels you. You grab a spade and make your way up the side of the house, using the frozen turf as awkward stairs. It's not elegant. Your foot slips. You grab onto a root. A child scrambles past you, sure-footed and smug. You try not to feel competitive. At the top, the snow is knee-deep and oddly lumpy. You and a few others start the rhythm of scraping, tossing, scraping again. Steam rises from your breath. The wind cuts across the exposed slope like a knife made of ice and poor life choices. Someone jokes, "If we don't fix it, the cows get the sleeping loft." Everyone laughs. It's unclear whether they're kidding. Quirky tidbit. Some families intentionally let grass and herbs grow wild on their turf roofs, not just for charm or insulation, but because they believed certain plants protected the home from collapse. Yarrow was popular. So was creeping thyme. Others just believed a good roof knew when it was appreciated. You pat the moss, just in case. Back inside, the tension lingers. Not just from the roof scare, but from people tension. Turf houses are cozy in theory, but in practice, they are glorified earth closets with very few exits. And when you've been trapped indoors with the same 5 people, 3 sheep, and a goat with authority issues for months, things fray. 2 brothers are arguing about missing firewood. A grandmother scolds a teen for walking too loud. A toddler throws a spoon with a level of velocity that suggests training. You feel it in the air, tight, thin, like a thread about to snap. Historians still argue whether Icelandic turf houses contributed to higher levels of familial conflict due to their enclosed design, or whether the shared hardship fostered deeper bonds. Archaeological evidence suggests both. Long-term proximity created both cooperation and, at times, total chaos. You decide to be helpful and offer to mend a broken bench leg. You are handed a wooden dowel, a knife, and a look that says, "Don't make it worse." Fair enough. As you work, you hear someone muttering to themselves in the corner. Not prayer, not poetry, just muttering. A low, rhythmic stream of complaints, observations, and passive-aggressive commentary about soup. This is what passes for therapy now. Later that day, a minor disaster strikes. Someone knocks over the butter tub. This doesn't sound serious, but it's treated like a full-blown economic crisis. Butter, remember, is wealth. It's food, trade, pride. The tub doesn't spill completely, but it's enough to cause an argument. Voices rise. Blame flies like snowflakes. You stare very hard at the wall and pretend you don't exist. Eventually, things calm down. The butter is salvaged. Apologies are mumbled. Someone breaks the tension by telling a story about a man who married his neighbor's cow by accident and only noticed when she wouldn't stop mooing during their wedding feast. Laughter bubbles up. Relief settles in. For now. You retreat to a quieter corner of the turf house where someone's weaving a net and humming a soft, wordless tune. You sit nearby, slowly helping untangle the line. The rhythm soothes you both. This is how turf house life works. When things crack, roofs, patience, routines, you patch them, slowly, carefully, together. Later that night, a storm rolls in. You can hear it battering the house, hurling ice and wind against the walls. The roof groans again, but holds. You find yourself silently thanking the moss. You lie awake longer than usual, eyes open in the smoky dark. Around you, people shift, cough, sigh. Someone mutters a prayer in the old tongue. A child whimpers. The goat snorts. You exhale slowly and think about how easily things can crack, how fragile this life is, how it all depends on turf, trust, and just enough warmth to get through. But you're still here, still whole, and the roof, for now, is still overhead. Night falls with a hush, and this time you notice it. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of silence, the kind that settles deep, even under layers of wool and wood and bone. It wraps itself around the turf house like a final blanket, muting the last clucks and coughs of the day. No one speaking. There's no need. The chores are done. The roof held. Dinner was edible. Mostly. The fire crackles quietly in the hearth, throwing soft orange light across sleeping faces and slowly shifting shadows. Even the goat seems contemplative tonight. You're not sleepy. Not quite. Just heavy, full of soot and soup and a kind of stillness you've never felt before. You rise quietly, careful not to step on the cat, which has taken up permanent residence on your feet, and move toward the center of the room. It's warmer now. Somehow, the turf house feels more itself at night. The smoke has thinned. The mossy walls absorb sound like a secret. And even the wind, that ever-present grumbler, seems to have backed off for the evening. You wonder if it's listening too. You walk slowly through the home. Each corner holds stories now. The bench where you churned butter until your arms forgot how to live. The spot by the wall where you dropped a fish and pretended it didn't happen. The little shelf with the carved wooden comb that may or may not have summoned a lice-related existential crisis. You step into the entrance tunnel, a narrow passage lined with stones and sod leading to the outside world. You don't open the door. You don't need to. You can feel the cold pressing through it, like a polite but persistent ghost. Beyond it is snow, silence, stars. But here, just a few feet in, it's still home. Mainstream historical fact: turf houses retained heat remarkably well. Their thick earthen walls and low ceilings created a cocoon of warmth that could survive the worst of Iceland's winters. At night, families would gather in the main room, the badstofa, not just for sleep, but for safety, comfort, and shared dreams. Someone behind you snores gently. Another person stirs and coughs once, then settles again. You hear the gentle rhythmic sound of wool being spun, Yes, even now, at this hour. Some chores never end. Some hands never stop moving. You turn back toward the hearth. There's a pot of water simmering, kept warm in case someone wakes thirsty. Next to it, a bowl of ashes waiting to be scattered come morning. A flicker of red embers glows in the center of the fire like a heart still beating. You sit beside it. Quirky tidbit. Some Icelanders believed the hearth fire had a spirit of its own, a protective presence that watched over the home. Letting it die completely at night was considered unlucky, even dangerous. So someone always stayed up a little longer just to keep it alive. Tonight, that someone is you. You prod the coals gently, watching sparks leap upward and vanish. Your thoughts drift. You remember your first day here, clumsy, frozen, slightly terrified of soup. You didn't know how to walk on packed snow, how to layer wool correctly, how to share a room with 5 people, a goat, and a chicken named after a saga hero. Now you move through the turf house like you belong to it, and it, somehow, belongs to you. Historians still argue whether turf house life was miserable or peaceful, whether it was brutal survival or intentional simplicity. But the truth, as always, lives in the middle. In the stories, in the stitching, in the shared breath of people and animals and walls made of earth. A candle flickers low beside you. One by one, people slip into sleep. The goat snores. The baby murmurs. The wind exhales. And you? You lean back against the turf wall, eyes half closed, heart half full. Tomorrow it begins again. Churns, snow, smoke, and soup. But tonight is for stillness. And as your body sinks into warmth, you think, this isn't just a house. It's a rhythm, a heartbeat, a lullaby made of moss. And now your story becomes part of it too. The fire is down to embers now, pulsing softly in the dark. Around you, everything is hushed. Even the wind, once wild and angry, has curled up beside the door like an old, tired dog. The turf walls breathe quietly, holding in warmth, holding out the cold. You lie back beneath the sheepskins, your body wrapped in the familiar weight of wool and memory. Your fingers trace the seams of your tunic, worn and patched, each thread a little piece of this life you've stepped into. Outside, the stars glitter through a thin veil of frost. Inside, nothing moves except your breath. Slow, steady, a little deeper now. You've done your part, lived the day, heard the stories, felt the ache of work, the sting of wind, the glow of shared warmth. There's nothing left to do, nothing left to remember, nothing pulling your thoughts forward or dragging them back. Only now. Only this soft, ancient quiet. Let it wrap around you, like the moss around the house. Let it settle on your chest, gentle as snow on stone. Let your mind drift, like smoke rising toward the rafters. You are safe here. You are warm. You are home, in a world that forgot to hurry. Close your eyes now. Let the turf house hold you, like it held so many before you. Let the wind stay outside. Let the stories fade. Sleep.